Good evening. I'm Jeff Pfeffer, Board of Directors Chair at the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. On behalf of our CEO, Susan Abrams, Board of Trustees, Board of Directors, and the entire museum organization, I would like to welcome you to this commemoration of the 82nd anniversary of Kristallnacht, the November pogrom. Our museum is proud to serve as a partner with the Jewish United Fund in serving our community. We would like to express our special thanks to our sponsors, Philip L. and Ellen H. Glass, whose generosity supports our Holocaust commemorative series. Our thanks also go to the families of Jack Hyman and Paul Hyman of blessed memory, and to Doris Baer for their support. We also wish to acknowledge our Nuremberg Symposium sponsors and community partners for this evening who were noted on our slides before the program. This virtual room is filled with many who play important roles in our organization and community. We wish to note the presence of Consul General Aviv Ezra and Consul General Wolfgang Musinger. Time does not permit us to mention every one of you by name, and we thank you all for joining us tonight. 82 years ago, a supposedly spontaneous outbreak of anti-Jewish violence swept through Germany, Austria, and the Sudetenland of Czechoslovakia. The Night of the Broken Glass, as it came to be known, marked the end of the beginning, or perhaps the beginning of the end, merciless persecution of Jews by the Nazi regime. Though it is now more than 8 decades since that hellish night in 1938, for those who experienced that night of violence directly, decades of time have done little to erase the horrors. Our thoughts are never far from those whom we lost and those who were fortunate enough to survive. Thank you for joining us for this most solemn and important date for Holocaust remembrance. And it is now my honor to introduce Museum First Vice President, Ralph Raybach, a Kristallnacht witness and survivor. Ralph.
Thank you, Jeff. I am a survivor of the Holocaust and Kristallnacht in Germany. This 82nd anniversary of Kristallnacht, also known as the Night of the Broken Glass, November 9th, 1938, causes me to remember and reflect. This date and event has been described as the end of the beginning and the beginning of the end. The beginning was the period between the end of World War I in 1918 and this date in 1938. That was the beginning. Hitler and the Nazi Party had come into power in 1933. This was the actual beginning of the Holocaust. And the way of life for our family and that of all German Jews was definitely over. The term beginning of the end describes the end of European Jewry, including the death of 6 million Jews and millions of others following closely after Kristallnacht until World War II in 1939 and its end in 1945. Kristallnacht is now taught in schools in Germany as the November pogrom or riot. It has produced a wave of violence that was unleashed against Jews and Jewish property. It was carefully planned and orchestrated and was not merely a spontaneous reaction to a shooting in France, as it has often been described. This year has me particularly concerned about the rise of hatred against Jews in our community and around the world. I am more aware than ever before of the need for all of us to be upstanders and not bystanders to these events.
Thank you so much for those beautiful remarks, Jeff and Ralph. My name is Megan Gieseker, and I am the Education Associate at Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. I will be your MC this evening. It is now my pleasure to welcome Consul General Aviv Ezra to our program this evening. Aviv Ezra currently serves as the Consul General of Israel to the Midwest, based in Chicago. Consul General, thank you so much for your participation this evening.
Thank you very much for having me. Good evening, everybody. And it is genuinely an honor and a privilege to once again be able to represent the state of Israel and the Consul General of Israel to the Midwestern United States, based in Chicago, in this important commemoration and inspiring event of commemorating once again the 82nd year of Kristallnacht. One of the pillars that unite all Jewish communities worldwide has always been remembrance. And remembering and honoring our shared history is always of the utmost importance, no doubt about that. Today, or maybe tonight, in this virtual kind of commemoration ceremony, I think we want to bring once again life into this core value of remembrance. For me, remembrance is not just to learn our history, but rather to learn from our history. As we all tragically know, anti-Semitism did not initially come to life on November 9, 1938, nor did it end in 1945. Disappointedly, it is not only alive and well today, but it is also on the rise, exactly like Ralph said. And not in remote places, but even right here, in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Some don't even recognize what anti-Semitism is. I've even heard that American Jewish Committee recent report last month found out and stated that nearly half of Americans aren't familiar with the term anti-Semitism altogether. So how are they going to be able to recognize it when it's there? Even more alarming, we have seen recent anti-Semitic incidents just in the past weeks right here in our backyards, in schools, in universities, in synagogues, and in many other places. This hatred, my friends, especially happening on campuses, is the face of the new and increasingly powerful and dangerous movement, anti-Zionism and delegitimization of Israel, a dangerous trend adding to the classical anti-Semitism that we all know too well. The focus, or the trend, if you will, has shifted from just saying that Jews are an inferior people to saying that the Jews are the only nation that does not deserve a state of their own. And this is unacceptable. There is no doubt in my mind that anti-Zionism is a reinvention of anti-Semitism. Don't get me wrong. While fair criticism is welcome in a democratic country such as Israel, extreme avenues that seek to delegitimize Israel and deny Israel's basic right to exist have found fertile ground, especially on college campuses, leading Jewish students to fear for their safety. Once again, unacceptable. That is also in total contrast to the official US State Department definition of anti-Semitism that includes delegitimization, double standards, or demonization of Israel. And there is no doubt that we are looking straight in the eyes of pure and outright anti-Semitism right here. The striking similarity between what happened in Kristallnacht 82 years ago and when Jewish homes and businesses were being marked by Nazis to exclude Jews from society, to what is happening today as we see Jewish cemeteries being vandalized, Chabad houses being lit on fire, should alarm all of us. However, my friends, the difference this time is how we react, how we cope, and how we tackle anti-Semitism. When we stand together, when we unite, when we are one, we can successfully overcome those who wish to destroy us. We must tackle the denial of existence head on. We must not shy away from the threat, but we must rather face it, even if it means going out of our comfort zone. And today, especially in these unprecedented times where social distancing, face coverings, and isolation makes it even more difficult to be together, I encourage you to remain united, to stay active, and to stand up to anti-Semitism and hate in every shape or form. When the ground that felt comfortable under the German Jewish community began to shake in the early 30s, most people did not see it coming. The minority that did understand the gravity of the situation decided to flee and leave everything behind. In fact, 900 of them boarded MS St. Louis to seek safety in the famous story of the St. Louis. However, they were denied entry to multiple countries, including the United States. And eventually they were sent back to Europe, where a quarter of them died in concentration camps. So why tell this story? What is the difference today? Well, Jews today will always have a port where the gates will remain open and never shut in front of their face. And that is our beloved state of Israel. My friend, just as critical as the state of Israel, we have all of you, and we have the superb work of the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center that is ensuring that we will never forget and that we will always stand up against anti-Semitism. I would also like to acknowledge the presence and thank personally my colleague, the German Consul General Musinger, for participating in this important commemoration ceremony. Thank you, Consul General. And I would like to conclude by stating that the State of Israel was founded with a promise to be the home of the united Jewish people, with a promise to ensure that never again will the survival of our people be threatened and dependent on others. We must therefore learn from our history and strengthen Israel's ability to keep this promise and to unite against the many evil faces of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. Only together it can be done. Am Israel Chai. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your remarks, Consul General Ezra. I now have the pleasure of welcoming Consul General Wolfgang Musinger to the program this evening. Wolfgang Musinger has led the Consulate General of the Federal Republic of Germany in Chicago since July of 2019. Consul General, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Consul General Aviv Ezra, for your kind words. Every year on the 9th of November, Germany remembers a multitude of historical events on this day, among them the Revolution of 1918 with the end of the empire and the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. The most poignant commemoration, though, is designated to 1938, when more than 1,400 synagogues, Jewish prayer places, homes, and shops were destroyed, ransacked, and set ablaze. This watershed event was a precursor to the atrocity that followed, the Shoah. Every year since, Germany has re-established herself as a democratic and tolerant country. We remember this day of national shame, nationally and internationally. It is one of the most remarkable developments in the post-World War that German diplomats are invited by Jewish communities all over the world to join in this commemoration, so in Chicago. It is with immense gratitude that I accept this invitation to speak to you in tonight's ceremony. Remembering the Holocaust and commemorating those whose livelihoods have been ruined, those who have been brutally attacked and killed on 9th of November 1938, is as important today as it has ever been. We witness now, in particular in connection with the COVID-19 pandemic, a revival of old conspiracy theories, of false prejudices, and of an inclination to forget or even to deny the Holocaust, reaching now even the mainstream of our societies. This dangerous radicalization requires an international response as well as action on the spot. The international response is coordinated by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IHRA. By assuming the presidency of IHRA, 75 years after the end of World War II, 82 years after Pogrom Night, Germany underlines once again her historical responsibility. IHRA's task is to set standards and benchmarks for the education of the Holocaust, as well as for research and for remembering through events, historical landmarks, and by keeping the memories of the survivors. What IHRA is doing on an international level, the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center is exactly doing on a local level. IHRA and ILMEC are pursuing a common goal, working towards a world without racism. Recent attacks on Jewish establishments in Germany have outraged the vast majority of Germans. The federal government has moved to establish a holistic response to this threat of our democracy by reinforcing its measure to safeguard and support Jewish life in Germany. By creating a cabinet committee against racism and right radicalism, the federal government encompasses all federal ministries and agencies to fight against this evil. By reinforcing security for Jewish establishments, it makes it abundantly clear that these organizations and their locations enjoy the protection of the state and that Jewish life in Germany is of utmost importance to our society. By speeding up judicial procedures against crimes related to racism, particularly if committed by state agents. By creating joint centers of police forces against extremism and monitoring social media. By encouraging state and local governments to follow the example of the federal government and establish a special commissioner for Jewish life. By assisting private initiatives who provide platforms to exchange knowledge about anti-Semitic activities, thus providing relief and protection to victims, as well as facilitating the work of law enforcement. By supporting projects of commemoration, like the virtual exhibition, 7 Places, which has been opened today and which shows 7 locations of Jewish history. The IHRA working definition on anti-Semitism is the foundation for all these activities. It helps to design a universal toolkit to teach on the Holocaust and its roots and its manifestations. It is very encouraging that the number of organizations in Germany and around the world which participate in these monitoring and combating endeavors have multiplied in the last years. But it is also worrying that these organizations are busier than they have ever been in the last years. Remembrance ceremonies like today's are important, are necessary, because we owe it to the victims and survivors. But we need to remember and to actively stand up on all the other 364 days of the year as well. We have to stop the flame of hate now. Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for those wonderful remarks, Council General. We are now going to hear some readings offered by members of Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center's Teen Leadership Board. The Teen Leadership Board for this year consists of 42 incredible teens from all across the Chicagoland area. They will work together to help us fulfill the museum's mission of Remember the Past, Transform the Future by bringing in teen voices and perspectives into the museum. Tonight, 3 of our second-year teen board members, Lexi Cohn, Ari Eisenberg, and Victoria Werdy, will read excerpts from Mitchell G. Bard's 48 Hours of Kristallnacht, Night of Destruction, Dawn of the Holocaust, and Oral History. Lexi Cohn will do our first reading.
Heinrich Müeller's orders to all Gestapo officers. Transmitted at 11:55 p.m., November 9th, 1938. 1. Actions against Jews, especially against their synagogues, will take place throughout the Reich shortly. They are not to be interfered with. However, liaison is to be effected with the Ordnungspolizei to ensure that looting and other significant excesses are suppressed. 2. As far as important archive material exists in synagogues, this is to be secured by immediate measures. 3. Preparations are to be made for the arrest of about 20,000 to 30,000 Jews in the Reich. Above all, well-to-do Jews are to be selected. Detailed instructions will follow in the course of this night. 4. Should Jews in possession of weapons be encountered in the course of the action, the sharpest measures are to be taken. Verfügungstruppen der SS, as well as General SS, can be enlisted for all actions. Control of the actions is to be secured in every case through the Gestapo. Looting, larceny, etc. is to be prevented in all cases. For securing material, contact is to be established immediately with the responsible SD leadership. Addendum for Stapo Cologne. In the Cologne Synagogue, there's especially important material. This is to be secured by the quickest measures in conjunction with SD.
November 10th was Rita Brauman's 12th birthday. That day in Cologne, her girlfriend Helga came to wish her a happy birthday. She was still at our place when the doorbell rang at 10:30 a.m. My father, who had meanwhile pinned his wartime decorations to his lapel, opened the front door. There stood several stormtroopers who asked politely, "Are you Brauman? Is this house your property and is this your family?" When he told them Helga was my friend, they turned to this blonde and blue-eyed girl and said, "You couldn't be Jewish too." When she nodded, they yelled, "Get yourself home." She burnt into tears and ran. To us, they said politely, "Go upstairs to your bedrooms." Then we heard the systemic destruction of all of our furniture with tools they must have brought up from the cellar, because they were not carrying anything when they arrived. The noise was terrifying. We went onto the balcony. Neighbors were on theirs and wanted to know what was happening, but we were too frightened to reply. Finally, there was silence. The sight that awaited us downstairs was unbelievable. Absolutely everything had been demolished.
On Kristallnacht, 11-year-old Lisa Lotta Foster saw her father cry for the first time. He went back to the shop in the morning and came back and he said, "Everything is gone. What they didn't destroy, they carried out." I see my mom standing there saying, "Everything will be okay." My dad was so upset. It was the first time I saw him cry. I didn't know why they would do that. It didn't make any sense to me. They tried to explain it to me over and over, and I couldn't understand. I'm a Jew. I don't look any different than the next person. I could never understand that. I felt so bad for my dad. Our life changed after that completely.
Thank you to Lexi, Ari, and Victoria for those readings tonight. We appreciate your participation this evening. Next, we will move to our candle lighting ceremony. As we remember the tragedy of what occurred on Kristallnacht, we light 6 candles in memory of the victims of the Holocaust. We will also observe a brief moment of silence.
We begin with memorial service, the El Maleh. Exalted, compassionate God, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, whose radiance is like the heavens, to the souls of all the men, women, and children of the house of Israel who were slaughtered, strangled, and burned in the Shoah. May they rest in paradise. Master of mercy, may they find eternal shelter beneath your sheltering wings, and may their souls be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Adonai is their portion. May they rest in peace. And we all say, Amen. El Maleh Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Dayan Almanot Eveavi Etovim, Hametzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanefei Ashchina. Bemalot Kedoshim Utiarim Kezoar Horokio Mazhirim Et Nishemot Rivevot Alefei Anashim Nashim Vetaf שנהרגו ושנשחטו, שנשרפו, שנחנקו ושנקברו חיים בידי המרצחים הרשעים, ומוגי לב יימח שמם. בעבור שכולנו מתפללים לעילוי נשמותיהם בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. נענה בעל הרחמים Tostireim beseiter knofecho leolamim. Vetitzror bitzror rachayim et nishmoteihem. Eretz al techasidamam. Adonai u'nachalatam ve'yanuchu b'shalom al mishkavotam ve'nomar We now recite the Mourner's Kaddish. It begins, may God's great name be exalted and hallowed throughout the created world, as is God's wish. May God's sovereignty soon be established in your lifetime and in your days, and in the days of all the house of Israel. And we respond with Amen. The Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal ve'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah. בעלמא דברה חירותי, וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון, ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה, יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, Shemede Kudsha, Brichu, Le'ela, Min Kol Birchata Veshirata, Tush Bechata Venechemata, Da'amiran Be'alma, Ve'imru Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, Vechayim, Aleinu Ve'akol Yisrael, Ve'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom. Aleinu ve'akol Yisrael ve'imru Amen. It's my privilege to have had the opportunity to say the Malay, the El Malay, and the Kaddish. And I do it in memory of my beloved father, who survived Auschwitz, but also his youngest brother, after whom I am named, Alberto Mizrahi, who did not get through Auschwitz. Let us remember and not forget.
Thank you to Hassan Alberto Mizrahi of Anshe Emet Synagogue. Ralph, we welcome you back for your closing remarks.
Thank you. All of us who are speaking tonight are in the interest of Holocaust knowledge, which we need to enhance because it's so lacking in the world today. The following is an op-ed that I wrote in commemoration of Kristallnacht. I was born in July of 1934. I am an only child, and my parents were living a peaceful and comfortable life in Germany until January of 1933, when Hitler and the Nazis took power. My parents were married in May of 1933. Those people who are willing to take a stand offer tangible evidence that freedom of choice and opportunity to fight injustice exist even in the darkness of times. Without the assistance of five extraordinary upstanders, my personal story would have a very different ending. Number one, Cousin Max. By spring 1938, the intensifying pace of laws against the Jews from 1935, the Nuremberg laws, prompted my mother and father to plan to leave our home in Gotha, Germany. But this was not an easy task. We and so many others like us tried to contact family members in the United States. Some were not willing or able to help. Thankfully, my mother's cousin, Max, agreed to prepare the affidavit of support that would sponsor our family of 3 for admission to the United States. That was the only way to be able to be accepted as German Jewish refugees into the US. My mother, God bless her, by herself sailed to America by being given permission to do so, to Hyde Park in Chicago in April of 1938 to retrieve and hand carry all the documents that had been prepared by Cousin Max and brought them back to Berlin at the US consulate in the hopeful issue of visas. We ultimately received a letter inviting us to come to Berlin for an appointment on, yes, November 10th. 2, the house sitter. During the evening of November 9th, we watched from our Berlin hotel window as fire destroyed the synagogue across the street one of the 1,400 synagogues torched that night. Another was ours in Gotha. You saw the wonderful, beautiful wooden inside of that Gotha synagogue a little while ago with the video that was being shown. With the cooperation of the local population, Nazis smashed windows, vandalized storefronts, and murdered 91 men. My uncle was one of them. He was a war veteran of World War I, and he was so severely injured that he could hardly walk. And as they were arresting him, he showed his papers that he was on disability from the German government. And they said it doesn't matter, he was on the list. He was kicked down the stairs and he was dead. The Nazis also arrested 30,000 Jewish men besides my uncle between the ages of 16 and 60. And they were sent to concentration camps. Back at our home in Gotha, the Gestapo came to arrest my father, but a young Jewish girl who was house sitting for us told them that she did not know where he was, and they left in disappointment and disgust. Back in 1933, all Jews were required to register. That is how they knew where every Jew lived. They did not need yellow stars in Germany. The Nazis knew all 500,000 of us and where we were. That evening, we received a phone call from the sitter at our hotel. The English lesson has been canceled, she said. It was a prearranged code set up with her and my father, which meant do not come home. And he never did again. All German phones were tapped, of course, and that is why they needed to use a code. Number 3, the US Marines. On November 10th, we went to our scheduled appointment at the US consulate to secure our visas, but paperwork delays required us to return the following day that we were ordered to do. We did, only to find that the consulate was closed because it was Armistice Day, the holiday we now call Veterans Day. It was November 11, the day that World War I ended at 11 a.m. November 11 at 11, 1918. A Marine guard standing at the gate was compassionate to our plight and tracked down the consul general at his home. He went to find and bring back the consul general to his office. And number 4, the consul general. Despite the holiday, the consul general returned to his office to complete our visas. His signature meant freedom for us. All that was left was for us to get out of Germany. Number 5, the stranger. My mother and I traveled to the German-Dutch border where all Jews were forced off the train. We were first strip searched to make sure that we didn't have any more than the $4 that we were allowed to take out of Germany. For reasons still unknown, and with all the suspense of an old noir movie, a Dutchman, a total stranger, tapped my mother on the shoulder and quietly separated us from the other Jews that were also waiting for the next train that we were all told to wait for. His signal to us, a slight tip of his hat, told us to follow him to a local train track and board a train to safety in Holland. Parenthetically, Holland was not overrun till 1940, and therefore it was still free from Nazi oppression. From Holland, we went to England, where we were joined by my father, who had traveled separately. And on December 15th, 1938, we left for the United States on the SS Manhattan, which docked in New York Harbor on December 22nd. I do remember seeing the Statue of Liberty. What a thrill for a 4-year-old. As we mark the 82nd anniversary of Kristallnacht, we are reminded of our responsibility to each other. We have a moral obligation to take a stand for humanity. We have the power through actions, both big and small, to become upstanders, as our 5 upstanders had been on our behalf. Our community must defend against those who attack others based on race or religion, and unite against anti-Semitism and all forms of bigotry. Sometimes the simplest of actions, writing a letter to a congressman, making a phone call to support a cause, or showing up at a rally or event, or tipping a hat to a stranger, can make all the difference in the lives of others, as it meant to our family of 3 because of the 5 upstanders. Please be safe and visit the museum and participate in the many virtual programs that are being offered. Thank you and good night.
Thank you all so much for attending and participating in our Kristallnacht commemoration this evening. We appreciate each of you for spending this time with us to remember and honor those whom we lost and those whom were fortunate enough to survive. If you are interested in learning more about our other upcoming virtual public programs, please click on the link that will be in the chat shortly. That will lead you to our events page. Thank you again for attending tonight, and good night.